4. The hypotensive factory owner. Background. 10 years ago, on a summer afternoon, I sat behind my large solid wood desk, patiently waiting for my 3 p.m. patient. It was after-hours private time, and I was in my private clinic. Only certain patients were accepted here, rich people who are concerned about their privacy. The woman that was coming had a toned body, over 1.76 meters, and looked even taller when she wore high heels. She had been my client for many years, and we became good friends. Her generous and straightforward personality made our communication a pleasure. She was shrewd and capable, and owned a large-scale auto parts factory. Only 2 companies in the country were capable of producing this component, and her factory dominated 60% of the market share. Prologue. Earlier that day she showed up just after 9 a.m. when my clinic opened, and said that a week ago she began to suffer from severe insomnia and irritability followed by persistent vertigo, low blood pressure, and almost fell into a coma several times. Such symptoms occurred every day at 10 a.m. sharp no matter where she was or what she was doing, and lasted until 5 p.m., not a second more, not a second less. I immediately arranged for her to have blood tests and a head-to-waist CT scan done. Since she had the best medical insurance, there was no need to skimp on the tests, so I ordered all the relevant tests for her. During the 3 hours of the tests, she went into panic and vertigo twice due to low blood pressure. Her mind was dull and she had difficulty communicating. By 12 o'clock noon, all the test results confirmed that the patient was absolutely healthy with no medically significant disease. The hormone and biochemical test results wouldn't come back until the next day, but they were of little significance for diagnosis purposes at that point. The patient was not sick. The symptoms were obvious: she was dying, but at the same time she was really healthy. Since both biochemical and physical tests had completely ruled out the possibility of any disease, I suspected that she might have a psychological issue, so I invited her to see me privately in the afternoon. The beginning. She was punctual as usual, but looked worse than she did in the morning. She asked to lie down as soon as she came, and her blood pressure was only 90/60. I immediately treated her with moxibustion and energy induction. Half an hour later, her blood pressure was back up to 135/85 and she felt much better. We started to talk about the onset and development of her symptoms. She recalled that the symptoms started last Friday. It was 10 a.m. She remembered it clearly because she had set her alarm clock to remind herself to make an important phone call. Just getting up from her office chair, she felt intense dizziness, followed by an outbreak of panic. At that time, she thought it was because she stood up too fast and did not care. But the symptoms went on like this every day without any relief. Afterwards, she thought that she might be tired from an exhibition the other day, or she was angry with her peers over some minor issues at the exhibition, and that she would be fine after taking a weekend off. However, even after a week had passed, the symptoms came back every day on time, starting and ending at the same time. Therefore, she couldn't go to work to run the company at all. I asked her, "What medications are you taking? What food are you eating? Have you ever been exposed to drugs?" She said, "No, certainly not even drinking." A blood test confirmed this. I asked, "Have you ever been exposed to some kind of psychological suggestion or self-suggestion?" The patient confirmed, "No." Just then, the patient began to feel dizzy and fatigue again, and her blood pressure dropped to 90/60 again. I treated her using the same techniques again. I filled her up with energy induction, but like a pool with holes, her energy was drained very fast within 2 hours. During that period, I also tried several psychological techniques and did not find any psychological suggestion or self-suggestion that could trigger these symptoms. I then switched to a standard traditional Chinese medicine approach to diagnose her. Her pulse was dangling, sunken and weak, the coating on her tongue was thin and white, her face looked pale, but her 6 meridians were smooth. After subsidizing energy to her Baihui, Guanyuan, Mingmen, and Laogong acupoints, the patient's 6 meridians went back to normal, but it would only last half an hour at most before the symptoms returned. The patient arrived at 3 o'clock, and 2 hours later it was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon when all the symptoms suddenly disappeared. The pulse strength was restored, the blood pressure was normal, and color returned to her face. The external aura of her body was fully opened just like an ordinary person, without any sickness at all. I was completely bewildered. No conceivable medical, psychological, spiritual, traditional Chinese medicine, or Western medicine knowledge could provide a reasonable explanation. To give myself some time to think it through, I made an appointment for her to come back for a follow-up at 4 p.m. the next day. Thinking about this case over and over for the whole night, I still had no clue. The next day, the biochemical report and CT scan came back showing she had no problems. But seeing her again. At 4 o'clock, she was still on time, but was pushed in by her husband in a wheelchair. Blood pressure 85/55, she had communication difficulties, and looked very numb. The patient's husband said that everything was normal when his wife got home yesterday. She made dinner in the evening and sent the kids to school this morning without problems. The onset came again at 10 o'clock and she had been like this since. He asked me if I had any clues from yesterday's examination and how to treat her. I still didn't have a clue. I turned my attention away from the patient and looked around, not finding any other spirits, not even her own guardian spirit. The patient's aura was scattered, gray and sticky. There was a faint thin line coming out from her back, very vague, really strange. I tried to inject her with energy just like yesterday, but the energy kept flowing away through the thin line, like a siphon. This is the reason. I protected her with my golden light of consciousness, and then cut off the thin line. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the patient recovered again. I didn't know if it was because I solved the problem or because it was the time for her symptoms to end automatically. I made an appointment to see her again. Follow up. The patient didn't return for half a month and I could not reach her by phone either, so I was very worried about her and wondered how she was. I ran into her at the supermarket one day and asked about her condition. She said that she got well for 3 days after she saw me that day, but 3 days later she had another attack, and it continued. Knowing that I had tried my best, she didn't blame me and went to get help from someone else. After using some secret counter-back method, the patient was reluctant to say more. Her strange disease was cured, but she worried that it would happen again, so she hid. The day before yesterday, she just learned that the owner of a competing factory was sent to hospital because of the same symptoms, and a middle-aged woman was also sent to the hospital. The two fell ill at the same time, and the symptoms were so strange that there was nothing the hospital could do. The middle-aged woman's symptoms were particularly severe. She had fallen into a severe coma and couldn't breathe on her own. After learning this, my client came out of her energy defense ring and went back to live a normal life. In the following years, the patient was all normal, and similar symptoms or events never occurred again. I learned through friends that the two patients with the strange disease did not receive any medical diagnosis in the end, and their cases were classified as rare hysteria. The middle-aged woman died a week later. The owner of the competing factory was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for long-term treatment, and his wife later sold the factory because of the continuous downturn.